By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to create and call Ruby methods and blocks. In order to program in any language, you need to be able to define your own methods. A function definition in Ruby starts with the def keyword and is followed by the function name and arguments. Then the body of the function determines the return value of the function. Lastly, the function is ended by the end keyword. Let's look at an example. So here we're defining a function called square that takes in num as an argument. Then it squares the num using the exponentiation syntax with the double star, and then the end keyword closes the method. You can see that square method was returned as a value after we defined it, and now we can use it. So we're calling square passing in 4, and we get back 16 as we would expect. Now Ruby does support using the return keyword to return a value from a function. However, it's much more common to use an implicit return, where the last expression in the body of a function is the return value. Now blocks are one of the most useful constructs in Ruby. Blocks are essentially anonymous or unnamed functions that we can create on the fly in the context that they're needed. Here's a simple block that prints out the first 4 powers of 3. You can see we're using a range, and then we're looping through that range. So 1, 2, 3, 4, where each of those items is passed in as power, and then we're printing 3 to that power by using our exponentiation syntax again. And you can see those values printed out. 3 to the power of 1 is 3, 3 to the power of 2 is 9, 3 to the power of 3 is 27, and so on to 81. Now the power in that example, the power variable with the vertical bars around it, that is known as a block variable. You also noticed in the example that we used curly braces around the block. So we define the block with an open curly brace and then a close. You can also use another syntax known as the do-end syntax. That also indicates a block where do is the start and end is obviously the end. We can rewrite the same code we had before using do-end instead of the curly braces. Blocks are often more than one line. The common convention is to use curly braces only for short one-line blocks, and use the do-end syntax for all multi-line blocks. Now in Ruby, every method can take a block, and then you can invoke that block using a special keyword called yield. Let's define a method to use yield. Let's define a simple method called pizza to use the yield keyword. In this case, we are going to print sauce and crust to the console. You notice that we put the yield statement at the top. So now in the bottom of our code block, you can see that we're going to pass in a do-end block to pizza. We're going to pass in a block, and that block prints out sausage, pepperoni, and olives. Now simply we can call pizza, and you can see all of those values are printed out in order. What that is good for is we can define a method that then later on we can pass in another method or another block, another contained section of logic that is only executed at that time. Let's use all this to create a function called triple that will multiply any number that we pass into it by 3. So you see here, we are naming our function triple. We're planning for num to be passed in as an argument. When we have num, we're going to triple it by multiplying by 3, and then we're ending that. So now we can call triple and triple any number that we pass in. We call triple, pass in 5, we get 15. Triple and pass in 4, we get 12. Let's now use the each method with a block to square every number from 1 to 10 and print the results to the console. So you can see here we started with a range from 1 to 10. We're using each. We'll use curly braces because our block function there is short enough it can fit on one line. We'll use our vertical bars or pipes to declare our block variable num, and we're going to put a string where we use interpolation, and we're going to take our num, and we're going to say that when that is squared, it equals, again, this is a string, but now we want to actually compute the value of it being squared. So we write that simple expression inside those curly braces, and we have to remember to close our block with another curly brace. And as you can see on the console, we get those strings printed that show every value from 1 to 10 being squared. We can actually rewrite the code above to use a do end instead of the curly braces, and that's simple enough. Now, on your own, complete the following tasks. First, create a function that takes a number and returns the double of that number. Next, write code that uses a do end block to triple each number from 5 to 10.